welcome back to another episode of The Language Lounge. My name is Michelle, and today I have Steven Lopez with me. Hi, Steven. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. One of the things I really love is that when I ask somebody to be a guest on the show, I have them fill out this little form, and I'm like, who else should I talk to? And so I got your name from Claudia Elliott, and I'm so glad that she introduced us to each other so that we could have this conversation today.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Professional development, professional learning is very near and dear to my heart. So I really do jump at the opportunity to collaborate, learn from others, and share with others if they feel I have something worthwhile to share. So,
oh, well, I'm sure you do. We had a little pre-conversation, a little mini conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to this. So today, when we met earlier and we kind of had a little conversation, what should we talk about? What are some, topics that you're passionate about? And it seemed like one theme kept popping up, and that was about students taking charge and leading their own learning. And I think that's something that maybe other disciplines do more often than us. And so I would love to, that's what we're going to talk about today, right? So first, why don't you tell me who your students are right now? I know you've taught lots of levels, lots of students, but why don't you give me just a little bit about where you are now and what your context is?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is my 14th year teaching. I did 6 at the middle school level, and I'm finishing now my 8th year at the high school level. I teach in Westchester, New York, so just north of New York City. And for the last couple of years, I've mostly taught upper levels, so 11th and 12th grade. We had AP when I started, but with collaboration with my colleagues, we kind of phased that out, and we now have a dual enrollment, which is, in my opinion, much, much, much better. And this year, I'm also teaching a brand new course, Spanish for Heritage Speakers. And that one is mixed grades. So right now I have 2 level 4, 2 level 5, and 1 heritage class that has 9th through 12th, which is actually, I thought it would be kind of awkward with the age group, but it's such a wonderful group of kids. And it's almost like a little mini family. So that age gap isn't an issue.
I love that. I think that's great. I think, those heritage speaker students don't always have a home, right, where they can come together with other students in the same boat. So I think that's wonderful that there's that opportunity. That's great.
In our school, we have open enrollment, so kids can take whatever courses they want, whether they're recommended or not. And this heritage class is the one where you are specifically chosen to be in it based off of your language background. And so it's not an open field. It's almost like invite only. So I think that added a little bit to it.
That's great. I love it. Well, why don't you kind of talk to me a little bit about, I know you had a lot of projects that we kind of talked about, passion projects and microphones and all of those things, but they all have that at the core, students really, owning their learning and really pursuing their interests. So why is that important to you? So where does that come from?
Yeah. So I think with language learning, it's almost like a humanities course at the college level. We can and do cover so many topics. We have, we call these global themes. And so we have a lot of flexibility. And one thing that I really love and appreciate about where I work is not only the autonomy I have to teach what I teach, but the trust also. And that also is in part due to the fact that we don't do AP anymore. And that wasn't by accident. I taught AP for a couple of years, and while my kids did very well, I found the curriculum to not be like that, to be very kind of rigid. There was so much to try to fit in, forget about 1 year, 2 years, and not knowing what will be on the test. And I just felt like we have to do this unit and move on, and this theme and move on. And I was like, this is not enjoyable for me, and I don't know if it's enjoyable for the kids. So with the dual enrollment now, I still have high standards, but I have the ability to kind of curate my lessons on the kids that I have in front of me year after year. So one thing I do at the start of every year, which I was very prompted to do from the National Board certification process, is to survey my students. And I give them a Google Forms at the start of the year. And it's very comprehensive. And some of the questions are just about you. What are your interests? What's your background? What do you do in your free time? What helps you learn? What's your learning style? And it goes on. But then there's a couple questions about, here are the global themes. and I have the ability to create lessons about what you want to learn. So please select the top 5 or 6 themes, whatever you want to do, and the forms, they quantify everything, and then I share with them, and then I remind them during, as the year. Oh, by the way, you as a class wanted to study tecnología, for example, technology. So we're going to do this. So whether or not that invites a little bit of motivation on their end, I make that a practice at the start of the year. It lets me let them know I'm taking their voice into consideration. And I'm not sure if I can figure this out or not, but I hope that does lend itself well to student buy-in and interest and being, okay, you know what? Yeah, I did want to learn this. So hopefully I'll give a little bit more effort or a little bit more motivation.
Yeah, I don't see how it can't, right? I mean, I think we all somewhat want to be, have our voice heard and have that listen. So do you find that like your classes kind of pick the same sort of things, or from year to year, class to class, do you find a wide variation in what they're interested in?
So it does change a little bit. Just for example, like my level 4 students last year, who are also my level 5 students this year, a theme that they wanted to do that appeared on both surveys, both years, was a unit on human rights and like almost like political themes. So because of that, last year I did a pretty exhaustive unit on the Cuban Revolution, and we did U.S.-Cuban relations. This year, my level 4 students did not pick that. They instead, I think one of the higher ones was a unit on fine arts and like urban art. So I'm going to try to fit that in at the end of the year. Some things that I found everyone wants to do every year is gastronomy or something involving food,
sure,
and music as well. So I try to incorporate that when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's universal, right? We all care about music and food more than anything, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of give your choice to your class in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you mentioned national boards, and I think we're going to talk about that later, because it sounds like that has also influenced some of your growth as a teacher, perhaps.
Yeah,
that's
the biggest takeaway was kind of that, getting like knowing your students well, and what better way to know them than by giving them a platform to present who they are, whether it was done privately through the Google Forms or like let them bring themselves into the classroom. Absolutely.
I love that. So not only do you give your classes some choice and you get to know them individually, but you also give them some personal choice within these things, from kind of what we were talking about too. So tell me a little bit about some of the ways that you do that.
Okay, yeah. So some things that pop out into my mind right now are, well, I said the first and foremost is, I'm going to mention, if she's around, Anita, if she's listening. She was my former mentor when I switched from middle school to high school. And so this idea really came from her, but over the years I've kind of harnessed it and made it my own. And it's with the idea of having a tertulia, or just kind of open-ended discussion. And since I do teach upper levels, I kind of guide the kids along, but it really is a student designed and directed activity. And it goes over the course of several classes. And I'm able to use this one kind of source and create a variety of activities all across the modes of communication. So with the tertulia, I have them pick a podcast, and I use the podcast series Charlas Hispanas. And they're excellent if you teach Spanish. They're very suitable for intermediate advanced students. They have 4 speakers, one from Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Peru. And they are literally uploading content every day, every week. And so when I started using them 2-3 years ago, they had about 200, 300 episodes, something like that. Now they have, I think, in the 800s. Wow. And so these are topics across 4 different Spanish-speaking countries, across a variety of cultural aspects and currents. And so I have them, step 1, choose a podcast, and I say, you're going to lead a discussion in about 2 weeks. For right now, step 1, I want you to choose 3 possible topics, and let me know why you're choosing them. And if I think this one is better, I'll kind of guide you in that direction. So step 1 of them taking ownership of this activity that they're going to engage in is choosing their own podcast. So that's the first thing I do. And then, if they're going to do all the work that I later assign with it, I hope that they just a little bit have some onus, since the fact that this is their kind of baby, their creation.
Yeah, something that they wanted to learn about, talk about, share with others.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some of the topics that your students choose?
Let me just think. Over the years, I've seen like the history of the coca leaf, a specific dance, a specific food, I had a student whose family is Argentinian, so she did a thing on Eva Perón and Peronismo, mythology from different countries, the Oscars. I mean,
Wow.
literally, if you go to their
Anything.
website, charleshispanas.com, the range of topics that they upload is definitely reflected in the range of things that my students chose as their topic for the tertulia.
Wonderful. How long are the podcasts?
They're around 10 minutes, 10
to 12
minutes. And that's a perfect amount of time to replay sections. If I need to replay a section or kind of focus in on one. And again, I find it very suitable. Like when you think of acquisition, that whole input plus one theory at their level, but a little bit challenging, I find that to be like exactly where it is. It's like at their level, not too easy, but it's challenging enough where they have to really kind of listen closely. So yeah, it's been a game changer for my classes.
I think that's great. And we'll put the link to this in the chat or in the show notes below. So we'll make sure that we do that. So okay. So the students, they listen to their podcast, they make their choice. Then what do they do? So you're getting them to kind of generate a lot of this language. It's not coming from you. So tell me what else they do with that.
So I take this one thing and then I really I milk it for all it's worth. So I create a bunch of activities and both a bunch of assessments. And depending on your schedule, your flow, you can really kind of pick and choose. So just the basic stuff, I have them first. Then after listening to it, they have an interpretation sheet, which I can also share, that they use later on for the Seal by Literacy, the New York State Seal by Literacy. So that's already, by doing this, is one of the artifacts that I do for the portfolio they'll need for graduation. And it has listing keywords, listing the main idea, supporting details, the author's perspective, the organization of the podcast, inferences. So it does assess their interpretive skills in a variety of categories. So they fill that out. I use it as an assessment grade, and that's also an artifact for the Seal by Literacy. So now I've taken one thing and used it twice. So
I don't think teachers do that enough. I mean, I think that when we find that kind of gold sort of thing, we need to milk it for all it is worth,
absolutely, right? Absolutely. So that works as a grade for me, for my class, and then also something that working towards outside for the Seal by Literacy. So the next step is I should say this, before they even do this, I mean, this type of activity is part of my class. Roundtable discussions, groups of 4, Socratic seminars. So they kind of know what the end goal is here. But if you don't do that, you would, as a teacher, may want to do one first on your own. So you choose a podcast, you listen as a class once, twice, 3 times, you guide them through this discussion so they kind of know what to expect. But this is kind of built in, so they already know. So then the next step is I share with them a list of Bloom's taxonomy, and they have actionable verbs in Spanish. And so I say, you're going to create a list of 8 to 12 discussion questions. A few can be at the lower, recall level, but I want to see 2 from, I have it right here. I want to see a few questions with every level of thinking. So some recall, some understanding, some application, some analysis, some evaluation, and some creating of your own. And because I do teach upper levels, these type of questions prompt them to use different tenses. If clauses, C clauses, using the conditional, the mood, the subjunctive mood, and the present tense, the future. So that's that. So I scaffold how to create questions, good, open-ended questions that will prompt your group mates to respond in something other than yes or no. So then that's the next step. So now we have the framework for the class discussion. Then I have them make a slides presentation with 10 slides. Each slide has 1 to 2 sentences summarizing a main idea of the podcast with an image or 2. And then when it's their day to present, they will also share that after listening to the podcast as a group, so that just to facilitate the comprehension of their group members. I said, you will have listened to this 2, 3, 4 times, but not your group. So you want to help them make sure they understand everything as best as they can so they can engage in your discussion. And then lastly, for the actual tertulia, they make a list of keywords, and the keywords are those that are essential for them to be able to engage in this discussion. So, and then we talk about what keywords are. If you were going to chunk this podcast down into 10 words that really capture the essence of the whole 10-minute episode, what would those be? So they then, on the day of their presentation, the tertulia, and I have a couple, so I might have a group of 4 or 5 students, so you can group it as you see fit. So they have their laptop ready to go. They have all these headphones here. They have a splitter. They plug them in. They all listen to the podcast together. The leader then goes over the keywords. It goes over the summary and then guides into the discussion. Based on your time, you can do 20, 30 minutes. I mean, depending on also the student's ability levels. So as a teacher, you would curate that. For me, I do about 30 to 40 minutes for the whole thing. So listening, reviewing, discussing, and then any extension activities. So that's the actual day of the tertulia.
I love that. What I love about it is that I think a lot of teachers, when they think about this, might have skipped all those other steps leading up to it, right? But you've had them do so many things that now that student has, really internalized, understood, knows that topic. I bet you they come in with a pretty high level of confidence, I would guess, to be able to talk to their groups.
My class, they love and hate it, but every class I have these cards with their names on them. So when they come in, I shuffle the cards every day. So, they met a different seat partner, a lot of rotations, but also this is how I call on students. I don't ask for hand raising. A regular practice of mine, just to give them a little bit of time to think, is, think, pair, share. So talk to your partner, 20, 30 seconds about this, and then I call on a couple students at random. And so knowing that they have to be present and participating verbally is just a practice. It has to be. I have them for 80 minutes every other day. So those 80 minutes has to be done in Spanish, and they have to be speaking as much as they can, in my opinion and my belief.
Yes. I love it. I think it's great. And how do students respond? Do they enjoy these? How do they, what kind of feedback do you get from them?
Good question. I've asked them for feedback on ways to improve it. And I think generally, I don't know if they're going to say they love anything that we do, but on those days, depending on the class size, I bring in a little bit of tea. I might have some meals. So it's like little snacks. It's an informal, fun day, in my opinion. They're with their peers. They're engaging. It's low stress, in my opinion. I'm not attaching a grade to it. Like, your grade is completion for this. Like, I've guided you. We've done step by step, and you're doing it along the way. So I want this to be just an activity that you're leading that you can discuss and promote higher order thinking. So it doesn't have to be a grade attached with everything. The other stuff that I do, yes, but like the activity itself, I want you to just to chat. That's what I want you to do. And so I hope that that's enjoyable for them.
I think that's awesome. I think that's great. So I love that idea of specifically the podcast, because they get so much choice on what they can listen to. And podcasts are personal, right? They're in the people's ear, and they're able to kind of really get a lot out of it. So
and then regarding your initial question with the extension activities, there's a lot you can do. If you want, you can have them do a 2 to 3 minute recording about their podcast. And that's then presentational speaking. If you're assessing that mode, you can then do the same thing at the written mode. You can, if you have a reflection on what was your podcast about, talk about the main ideas, what cultural perspectives did you learn from this? Can you make a cultural comparison? There's a writing assessment as well. So really, you can take just one little thing and do a lot with it. So
I think that's great. I love it. I think and I just love all the deep thought that the students are having to produce, not just comprehending a text, but really understanding it in a deep level. So in so many different ways. So I think that's great. So tell me about some other projects that you do that are student centered.
Yeah. So there is something that's become a staple of my level 5 classes, and it's called a passion project. I think I have the book here that kind of inspired it. So I was part of a book club a couple years ago, and Most Likely to Succeed. It's a little bright in here, and also What Schools Could Be. And kind of the author kind of just reimagined what schools could be to best meet the needs of our current society and trends going forward, and what we imagine and what schools how they could be different from the industrial age. And one thing that got me thinking was, again, also having students design kind of like a capstone project to them to demonstrate their learning in a unique, individualized way. And again, this is done in part because I don't have the AP in May anymore. So it's changed a little bit over the years. It's gotten a little bit better in my opinion. But a passion project. Have them, I prompt them to choose a topic, think about a skill, a large scale question they want to answer, a problem they want to solve, something that they want, something that's new or interesting to them. And I let them choose literally anything and everything because I can find a way to tie it to the Spanish speaking world later on. But first, I guide them through a series of questions on, you're going to later on like present this thing to a larger audience. So what is something you've wanted to learn about, to do, a skill you wanted to develop or practice, a problem you want to solve? And I kind of guide them through developing that. And I'll share some of the topics I've done over the years. So then once we've done that, over the next couple of weeks, I then guide them on making an action plan to meet that goal. So some of them are things like kids choose to create projects on sustainability. I've had kids using algorithms to create a program that compares the root words across languages. I've had kids. I'm just looking at the thing now. I've had kids do like economic forums and write like a pitch to like improve the GDP of a certain country. I've had kids take things they've learned in like their science classes and create like a model of some sort of like hydroponic system to help cultivate plants indoors. Just a variety of things. I've had kids make memes after having studied the philosophy of different Spanish philosophers. Just such a variety of things. But then I guide them in, okay, so how are you going to learn about this topic? How are you going to develop this skill? How are you going to solve this problem, quote unquote, over the next 6 weeks? So I make them compile a list of resources they're going to use in the target language or not, and things that are outside sources or something they're going to speak with as a mentor, whatever it is. And so I give a little bit of class time over the course of 6 weeks for them to work on this project. And what they produce is really up to them. I've had kids make a podcast series on true crime in Puerto Rico. I've had kids make their own sheet music and play music the night of the exhibition. Some people are doing stuff involving food, making like crocheting, using like a Mayan method of weaving, whatever. And they're allotting time to do this project. And then comes the culmination. So this is something that is an exhibition and not just a class project. I then have community events whereby I invite parents, administrators, families, other teachers. I have my colleagues invite their classes and younger levels to attend in Spanish. I have my level 4 students pair up with one of my level 5 students, and they work as interpreters and translators so that anyone that passes by, if they don't speak Spanish, they are speaking in English and being translated with my level 4 students. That gets them involved, getting anticipated for next year.
Wow.
So it's a way to, for me to like let them bring their interests and their passions and their interest, what they want to do to the classroom, but then also a way to kind of honor and celebrate their language learning. This is something that's for my level 5 classes. We don't have anything past this. And so a way for them to be able to converse with both native speakers, lower level students, or adults in the community who speak Spanish and be ready to talk about it. Part is presented to class and part is that interpersonal aspect. So we developed that kind of that preparation over the course of the 6 weeks. So it's nice because, again, it's varied. It reflects the diverse students that I have, their interests, their hobbies, their abilities, but also becomes a way to really celebrate them. And I've had students, already in level 4 or level 3 is telling me what they want to do for level 5. They have an idea already. So it really becomes like this kind of like buzzing thing within the department and within the Spanish, I guess, course of study. So that's something that I do believe that really does highlight their choice and their interests.
I love that. I also really love that you bring it out into the community. You don't keep it just in your classroom for your students or even your department or the other Spanish students, that you bring that out. What an amazing advocacy tool to kind of connect them, connect the community to your program, but also to connect your students out into that outside world. Because I think that is one of the hardest, in my opinion, one of the hardest standards to meet are the ones that tends to get that community standard kind of gets left behind sometimes. So I really, really love that.
Yeah, and it's nice too. It's the event itself. I plan it around 6:30 p.m. It's an hour. A lot of the action happens, but a lot of the parents offer to bring in. They bring in food. So it becomes a fun event. And also, like, I remember I was told this from a parent when I was in middle school. Like, parents of elementary kids are very much involved. Still in middle school, by high school, it's kind of separate.
Yeah.
They have to beg to know what's going on, and it shouldn't be like that, in my opinion. And I think it's really nice. I don't have kids, but I imagine, how's school today? You don't get much. So for
Yeah.
parents, I've seen over the years that parents that do come in to attend, and they're like, wow, I had no idea my kid could speak like this. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're doing. So I think they're very pleasantly surprised to see their 17, 16-year-old, 18-year-old stand by a station and talk about this thing that they've produced, a tangible or intangible item, and speak with level 1 students to adults and everything in between. So it's a really, it's a wonderful thing. So as long as I teach level 5, it's going to be a part of this course of study.
Yeah. I also just think it's such a real world sort of activity. I mean, how many times are we asked to, produce something, do something, present something? We have to talk to all different types of people. And that's something that, young people, everybody kind of needs to learn how to do as well. So what a valuable life skill
Absolutely.
that's being in there too.
Yeah. And that really came from the book. I mean, the first book, What Schools Could Be, kind of really started off sadly depressing. And it's true in many ways, in many ways, we're still teaching and having the same kind of schedule as when school became public during the Industrial Revolution, because kids had to be taught how to basic literacy skills and how to be kind of factory producers. That's not the case anymore. And in fact, Forbes is always listing about these traits they want in college graduates, and rote memorization and cookie cutter stuff is not in there. They want innovation. Right. They want outside thinking, critical thinking. They want collaboration. They want production. And this was my way of being like, you know what? I'm not saying that I've taught them how to be creative, but I'm giving them an opportunity to showcase their innovation and their creativity in a different way. So that I was very inspired because of that book to do that.
I love it. And I know, even in my job that I do now, or even as a teacher, part of what keeps us passionate, keeps us motivated, keeps us kind of going is when we can bring in our own experiences, our own passions, our own sort of creativity itself. And I think that's highly motivating to everybody. So I think that they have that opportunity to really do that and dig into that in that age. My son is in college, and his college has a capstone project that he's going to have to be doing in 3 years. And I think about it now, they're prepping him, he's looking forward to it. They're trying to work his way up to it. And your students are going to have such a head start in all of that. So I think that's just amazing.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. Yeah. Any other projects or any other things that you tend to do to kind of let those students kind of really show themselves, their strengths and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So this is nothing novel, but when you take the time to do it, you have it, and it's a very valuable, I guess, repertoire in your drive, your folder. So choice boards. I didn't do them before the pandemic, and I have because of that when we went to remote and hybrid. So, and I won't really talk about this, I'm sure it's on other episodes, but it's a very trendy thing to include class readers and novels. And so during the pandemic, I decided to use them because I'm like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I'm going to be in school or not. None of us did at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I said, if we're hybrid or remote or a mixture of two, whatever it is, I need to have something, a resource that I can use, whether I'm at my computer, at home, in quarantine, or whatever it is. I need a single resource, and that is a communicative tool, and I'm going to build my lessons and interactions around that. So I've used a couple of different novels over the years, and I'll just use one as example when I did the Cuban Revolution. So I used the novel Casa Dividida, which I use in my level 4 classes. And so I used this choice board at the midway part of the novel, and then again at the end. And so what I did was, obviously, I didn't want to have everyone's going to do this one assignment or this one thing. I'm going to give them a variety of things to choose from. So, and a different way to kind of assess their learning, but with the same end goal. So I will preface by saying this. I gave them, let me see here, this document, 11 options of things they could do to show their learning of the unit, the Cuban Revolution, U.S.-Cuban relations, and also human rights. But they're going to choose something that they want to do, but then produce whatever work that they're going to do with all the same expectations. So I'm not, quote unquote, grading easier or harder.
Mm-hmm.
There's the same end goal, but I want you to choose what you're going to show me you're learning. So for example, for number 1, music, my musically inclined kids, I use 2 songs, Hasta Siempre Comandante and El Chacal. They're quite different songs in terms of the message they want to promote. And then I have them do a written or verbal reflection with specific guiding questions on that. And I'll assess them using a presentational rubric for that type of modality they use, speaking or writing. Second, poetry. I include the poem Sensemaya by the Afro-Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen. And I give them a couple, again, guided prompts, and they'll produce written or spoken work with that. Next, I have art using La Jungla by Wilfredo Lam. And again, they can analyze art, both artistic interpretation, literal kind of observation, guided questions for the reflection as well. Next, politics, cultural comparison. They do like a kind of AP style cultural comparison with guided prompts. Next, design illustration. They make like a smash doodle, like kind of like a drawing, a series of drawings with like subtitles and like kind of prompts from the novel itself. Next, I had them do the Cuba Libre Netflix docuseries on that. Even though it's in English, it's very captivating. Guided questions as well for the reflection. 7, I had them do an option for a podcast. They can choose 2 or 3 friends from my class or any of my other sections of level 4. I give them guided discussion questions to discuss Cuban-U.S. Relations, the revolution. Next, I had him. I had a whole thing with Jose Marti, the national hero of Cuba. Next one was kind of this interactive word wall with keywords and vocab words from our units. Next was another listening one. So I found like the Duolingo podcast. It's about a teacher that was working with the Castro regime, and she went to like impoverished areas to promote literacy. And the last one was another documentary on Ana Montes, who was like a Cuban spy, but in the CIA, that was actually just released from prison, like I think a few months ago. So anyway, my point is, I looked and researched a variety of ways that they can choose something about the Cuban Revolution, U.S.-Cuban relations, but also demonstrate their interest and their learning with those varied units. And then again, I used the same rubric for kind of all of them. So it was just a way to kind of change things up a little bit. I had already created a lot of these resources, and since I wasn't able to use all of them because of the slower pace of hybrid and remote teaching, I'm like, I want to use these, but I don't want to get rid of them. So let me just put them all in these documents. I'll get a couple other ones, and I feel better about putting it out there. So they'll be used in some way, shape, or form. So I've done a couple of those for different units and different novels. So like I said, it's a little bit of work at first, but once you have it, it's there and it can be used and recycled.
Yeah. Absolutely. As you're reading the list, I can imagine like, ooh, that would be super interesting. And some of them I'm like, that's not my thing. Right. And I think that's so powerful to be able to have that, the thing that's exciting to me personally, and to be able to dig into that.
And last year I had 3 level 4 classes, and across my 4 classes, one of those options was chosen by at least one or multiple students. So right there, it let me know that it was worth it, at least.
Yeah. The other thing is, how much better for you, or how much more interesting and engaging for you as a teacher, as you're assessing these things and you're not listening to
the same thing,
and a little bit different take, but it's all still the same thing, right? And so that's another reason I love choice boards. They're simple. They're nothing new, but I think that sometimes we just forget about that tool that's in our toolbox, right? And I think it's
easier for us. It's easier for us to kind of create one activity that everyone's going to do. But, if we're talking about giving students a voice and choice in their learning, that captures the essence right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. There's those three really solid, fantastic activities. And, even though you teach the upper levels and those examples are kind of high in that upper levels, me being a former level one and middle school teacher, I can see how I could adapt some of those things. There are
Yeah,
simpler podcasts or listening sort of activities they can do, simple questions, more scaffolding and sentence
absolutely.
frames. But I absolutely think that
Yeah,
just some easy first steps of how any language teacher,
yeah.
whatever level you are, could start giving students more choice, voice, ownership of their language. I really
Absolutely.
love that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, with the list that I have here, the document, I think all but two could be used with 12-year-olds. If
Yeah,
you teach middle school, I mean, but taking out the songs and taking out the poem,
yeah,
I think all of these can be scaffolded, and the output for your proficiency level is there.
yeah.
If you can do it in English or into the
Target language.
proficiency level for the class
Yeah.
that you teach. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. The last thing I wanted to talk to you, because I do think this, you mentioned it when we were talking before, and that is your journey with national boards. Because I really
Yeah.
feel like that was something that you were passionate about. I know I never had that. I never took that opportunity. But people that have really talked about how transformational it is
Yeah.
to their teaching. So I just want to give you a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about your experience with that, because I know that's something that you're interested in sharing as well.
Yeah. I've presented on this twice in the last year. So um, I think if any teacher is passionate about their craft and doing it for the right reasons meaning for your own craft and the betterment of the students, I think it's 100% a worthwhile experience. So I remember I've registered an account with the national board years ago. And when I saw how much is involved and also the price, I was like, oh no, not happening. So I didn't look at it again. Then November 2020, deep in the pandemic, I thought about it again, and I was like, all right, I'm in New York, so we were locked down for quite a while. I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be home, giving this the time it deserves. It's now or never. So I re-registered and paid for like my active registration that year, November 2020, and I did it all in that academic year. So if anyone's thinking of doing this in 1 year, I don't recommend it. The only reason I did is because I spent multiple Saturdays and multiple Sundays consecutive
Yeah.
at my computer, writing, reading, rewriting, doing workshops. Um, Luckily, because everything was remote, there were so many teacher centers around the state that invited me to be a part of their regional teacher center, and it was a full day working session, interactive. And so, if it was not for that, I would not have certified in my first year. So, I'll first say this: anyone thinking about doing it, think about doing it at least 2 years, because if you're doing it 1 year, I think really you are setting yourself up for failure. So anyway, that's that. Also kind of crazy, a national board is all evidence based and portfolio building and showing that with evidence that your students have improved in this way, shape, or form, and deciding to do it during COVID was more challenging than it needed to be, but they were flexible with deadlines. But anyway, so the meat of it, national board standards. There's the principles and like their standards that they have that they feel any teacher, whether you're in Alaska or Florida, kindergarten, 12th grade, music, physics, doesn't matter. There's certain characteristics and traits and actionable items that any teacher that they feel is highly accomplished possesses, includes, and just does. This is created by teachers for teachers. So, we oftentimes have things dictated at us by people
Hmm.
who are not in the classroom or haven't been. This very much is teacher created. And so I really do believe firmly in that. And just for world language, they have, first and foremost, they want to make sure you have the proficiency. So
Hmm.
you take the OPI and the written proficiency exam. I also recommend doing them on separate days. Um, it's a lot. And you have to score at least advanced low on the ACT full scale. Without that, you cannot proceed. Then
Wow.
comes our portfolios. Yes, then comes our portfolios. And so component 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 1 a year. You can do all 4 in 1 year. You can do 2 a year. You can combine them, whatever you want to do. You can redo one. It's really a personalized journey. So you figure out what you want to tackle this year, what you want to do later on, that kind of thing. So component 1 is a computer-based test you will take in a testing center. And I hadn't taken a high stakes test since college. So when I sat there, I was like, oh my goodness, I was so nervous. You saw the time
Wow.
going down. So I did that last. That was the very last thing that I did. It's a variety of things they asked. There's a multiple choice section, and they took everything and anything from my undergraduate, my master's, involving teaching, language acquisition, adolescent development, proficiency attributes, multiple choice, anything and everything, all combined in one. So they want to make sure that you're an expert in your content area, but an expert in teaching. So you need to know a lot about a lot of things about the Spanish-speaking world and language and history and movements and whatnot. There's other parts where you have to, they'll present the student sample of work, and you have 30 minutes to write a brief essay identifying their proficiency level based off what you see. And then making an actionable plan, an action plan on how you're going to get them from, let's say, intermediate low, intermediate mid. What does that assess? That you know where students are based off of what they produce, and what you need to do, backed by research and best practices, how to get them from here to here. That's another essay you do. Another one is on culture. They could ask anything about the Spanish-speaking or French-speaking worlds. On the day of, discuss an important artistic movements in the Spanish-speaking world, and they give you guided prompts. Discuss a site of importance and what it meant, for that time period. I mean, anything and everything. So you have to study a lot. And there's another one, another like kind of cross-curricular essay to do. So that's a lot. It is a lot. But if you are well crafted and you know your content well, and you're an expert in what you do, and of course with some studying, you should do well with that. Component 2 is about differentiation. Just kind of give you a summary. You'll have to kind of administer a pre-assessment and then a post-assessment later on, but identify 2 students, and in your write-up, and it's a lot of writing and a lot of like specific prompts to include and verbiage. What is your plan to get these 2 students from here to here? And in your writing, tell me about the student. What are their interests? What are their learning styles? What are their learning, roadblocks? What motivates them? What are their goals, linguistic goals, personal goals? And with all that in mind, in your pre-assessment unit, what are you going to do in a differentiated manner to get these 2 students to this level? And then with your teaching and then your post-assessment, you have to quantify and quite literally show the assessor that because your teaching is so good, and you know the students so well, and you know exactly what you need to do, you're going to get them to this point. And again, a whole write-up, whole portfolio, documents and evidence, and it's all the evidence-based. 3 is your teaching. You're going to have to record 2 10 to 15-minute videos, again, with specific requirements, one with the whole class instruction, and one with small group instruction or personalized instruction. And again, a whole list of what they're looking for an accomplished teacher, and another very extensive and exhaustive write-up, and explaining why you did what you did and why you responded in this way and why the lesson was curated this way, and that. And then component 4 they nicknamed the beast, because it really is a whole it's like a whole variety of things you have to demonstrate. So just to kind of sum that up really quickly, you have to identify a need of a certain group of students. And how do you get that? How do you identify that need? Speaking with other teachers, coaches, parents, guardians, other staff like school psychologists, counselors, anyone, to get a whole profile of this group of kids in front of you. After you have gone through all that data, all that evidence, what do these kids need? Is it social emotional? Is it linguistic? Is it writing? I don't know. You as the professional and the expert have to identify what these kids need. Then you have to undergo some sort of professional learning. Read a book, read an article, a journal, attend professional development, take a course, and then in your write-up. So I have determined that my kids in level 4, period 3 need this. I got the information from these sources. In order to meet this need, I have undergone this type of professional learning. With this learning, I've applied these strategies to my teaching. And then with these strategies, my students were here and they're now here. And then also, again, this whole exhaustive write-up, evidence, portfolio building. And then this part I don't really understand because it's so mathematical. But then once you've submitted everything, all 4 components, the assessors have this kind of scaling calculator, and then you get a weighted and a raw score, and you either certify or you don't. So, but so to the original point, how has it revitalized or improved me or my teaching and learning? Well, I will say this: when I submitted everything, I sat like in silence for like 10 minutes, and I was like, there was not a single thing in my undergrad or my 2 graduate degrees that challenged me anywhere as close as this process did. So the reading, the reviewing, the studying that I had to do about language teaching in general, adolescent development, but then also revisiting all those Spanish language cultural pieces just made me feel like I needed to be an expert in what I'm doing. So that's first and foremost. Mm-hmm. Secondly, it forced me in a way to really collaborate with other professionals and parents and families and the students themselves to really better understand who are these kids in front of me, what are the things that I need to teach, but also what do they need, and how can I combine those two to best create the learning experience that holds them to a high standard of learning, to meet to a high standard of teaching, and to meet the needs of these kids in 2022, 2023, post-pandemic, and also still being in the target language. And also the process itself is very reflective. I mean, everything is reflective. What worked and what didn't. And then, after you've gotten to this point, reflecting on it and then starting from scratch. It's all cyclical. So now I did this, I reflected on this data, and now what can I do for the next unit? And then it's all cyclical. So it has forced me to really be collaborative, really be attentive and attuned to my kids and what they need and what I need to change or not change to just continuously improve the teaching and learning experience, and then reflect, refine, and apply for the next week or the next unit or the next year. So that's how it's really been helpful for me.
That's amazing. I have to admit, I have to give a little more credit whenever I see those little initials on a tagline. I feel like I need to make sure I acknowledge that. That is an incredible experience and a level of deep understanding that is so, I mean, like you said, I don't think I definitely didn't reflect or work that hard in my ed leadership master's program or anything like that. Right. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that experience and really,
I definitely recommend it. Thank you. I recommend it for everyone. I mean, I know it's expensive. So I'll just give you some numbers. To register, just have an active account, I think it's like $75. The one unique cost for language teachers is the exam, which is like 100 and something. You can get a bundle, but every component is $475. So times 4.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So depending on where you are in the country, your district may offer some support. Your local, your regional teacher center may offer some assistance. Your state, New York State, offers a grant for this process. If you certify, you can submit after the fact reimbursement on a rolling basis. So it is a major undertaking, both personal, professional, time, but also financial. So, you want to assess that if it's right for you and, what kind of supports you can get. Some people don't certify in their first attempt and may need to redo it a second time. And that's another added cost. So those are definitely things to keep into consideration. And then also like I said, the right reasons I said in the beginning, depending on where you are. So I know some states offer a stipend, just a flat rate stipend, like a 5,000 increase or 10,000 increase for anyone who's certified. Some other districts offer incentives, some don't. So it's very much like a local and regional state type of financial incentive. So check that out. It may incentivize you, but if you're doing it for the money and not because I truly mean that. If you're doing it for the money and not because you are vested in this type of teaching and learning, I think you're going to really regret it, because the time and effort and detail and attention it requires, you need to kind of be there for the right reasons. Yeah. And then the payment, of course, is great. We all need, especially with this today's day and age, but make sure your heart's in the right place. That's my advice for you.
Yeah, because that could be a pretty miserable way to get a pay increase if you're
Oh my
not in it for the right
goodness.
reasons, right?
Or you did it multiple years, and then also
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on this, but I think if you don't certify within 3 attempts, you're then barred from it. So imagine paying all that money,
Wow.
redoing it, and you can't do it at all. So like I said, make sure you really want to do it, and
Yeah.
your heart's in the right place.
Yeah. Well, and I like how you said, you looked at it and it wasn't the right time.
No.
Right. So this is, we're putting it out there. Thank you for sharing that experience. Maybe,
Yeah.
Teachers out there, it might not be the right time now, but kind of put it in your pocket and, and bring it out when it is. So,
yeah.
Well,
And if any teachers, I don't know if you want to plug this in, I mean, I'll give my contact info. I'm happy to share materials, share a document, or any, advice on national boards. So I'll leave with you my contact information.
Absolutely.
I'm always happy to help.
Wonderful. We'll put that in the show notes, and I'm sure that will be greatly appreciated. This might be the push that somebody out there is looking for. So awesome. Well, thank you, Steven. This has been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed listening to all of the things that you do with your students and for yourself, and how you can, you grow and learn and keep moving forward too. It's very inspirational, and it's been just lovely talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I hope to chat with you again in the future. Don't be a stranger. And it's been great.